There we go. I'm Reverend Jackie Fernandez, and welcome to our DEIJB conversations, my favorite time of the month, at least one of two times. And I'm so grateful on this World Day of Prayer, Unity's High Holy Day, if you ask me, to be able to bring forward this idea of inclusivity in prayer and meditation. And last month we talked about inclusive language as far as it refers to people with disabilities or with just different social experiences in terms of being marginalized and different ideologies that come forward, sometimes unconsciously, in our prayer language around that. I also challenged you to watch your own prayers and just kind of have a new perspective and to see if you find yourself in a rut with your own prayer language or maybe finding some opportunities to expand the language that you've been using. And so I look forward to hearing a little bit about that. But let's go into today. We will be talking about, let's see if I can get the right PowerPoint up. There we go. Um, Hold on one second. Apparently I can't talk and there we go. And move my screen at the same time. There we go. Now you're seeing my PowerPoint. So we'll be talking about inclusive prayer and meditation, but as it refers more to the theology and how we pray publicly or in mixed crowds. We're going to get a little bit into a topic that is really on for us right now in terms of being in a politically charged climate, how to speak to mixed audiences, which we most often have, and we may or may not know it. So let's dive into this. And so, what we know about prayer is that it is a universal practice. And I always have this quote at the top. I first stumbled across it last year preparing for this particular session. Concepts shape language, and language shapes community. And I think that just as spiritual leaders, it's really good for us to keep that in mind because we are constantly in communication, whether it's from the business aspect of church, whether it's, as an employer of staff or through the actual work of ministry, to really hold close to our heart how our concepts shape our language and our language shapes our community, and to really kind of evaluate the lens that we are using with our language through everything that we do. So prayer and meditation are universal practices, and yet our language often reflects cultural and theological bias, often unconscious cultural and theological bias, which is why we do this work, why we have these conversations. So our opportunity is to speak words that include without erasing and name suffering without politicizing. And sometimes that feels like a tightrope that we're walking, and sometimes it feels easy. And right now, I think, sort of minding our own skill set with that and really remembering that it's a skill set can help take us out of just our own emotional trauma that we may be experiencing and the fatigue of that over time. Especially if you've been in ministry through the COVID pandemic and then now through the political climate we're in. It's been a long tenure of very challenging conflict in the zeitgeist, if you will. So good for us to hone our skills and to maybe offer a little separation from our own heart space for it, and remember that we are skilled at what we do, and there are tools that we can use to help us through our work. So let's look at the global landscape of prayer. When we pray publicly, we acknowledge prayer is a human act before it is a religious act. I would say there was prayer happening before there was any sense of organized religion, whether it was just a crying out to the world, to the earth, to the ocean, to the trees, to the moon, to the sun, to the stars, that it is a very human act, and it is in our nature to pray. So we always want to get out of our own sort of bias, which most of us, not all of us, our unity movement is a global movement, but it is centered in the U.S. and the vast majority of our ministries and ministers are, I think that's still true, are U.S. based, and we have, this Christian, if nothing else, we have Christian roots, and we are, culturally Christian, spiritually eclectic, however you want to categorize that, that is our default, and we use Christian language most often. So let's just take just a run down the list. This is very oversimplified, so I just want to put that out there. But let's go through the world's major religions. Islam, prayer as submission and rhythm. So salah is, it's very scheduled, it's rhythmic, it becomes part of your daily activities to pray 5 times a day. Judaism, prayer is as remembrance and covenant. So it's very much related to community, to the community aspect of being Jewish. And prayer is mantra and devotion. So there's that more devotional aspect and relational aspect. Buddhism, meditation is mindfulness and liberation, liberation from our attachments, if you will. And then in indigenous traditions, prayer is connection to the earth, to the ancestors, to community. And so these are the ways that different groups, again, overly simplified, approach prayer. But again, even in this sort of oversimplification of it, if we can kind of keep that in our toolkit of understanding and approach, it also begins to shape our own approach to prayer. And you might find yourself like, actually, my prayer practice over time has become more mantra-based or devotional-based. You might find, or in a given situation, you might realize, oh, what I need here is a mindfulness meditation, or what I can offer in this scenario is, this different approach. So again, not to appropriate, but to just really consciously have an approach to prayer and to shake ourselves loose of our own embedded defaults. So the core principles of inclusive prayer. We're going to name the sacred broadly. Spirit of life, source of love, holy presence, mystery, universe. And as I said last month, I think in Unity we're really pretty good at this. We're generally very open about the words that we use to name the divine. And I think many of us even change that. But again, I challenge you to discover if you are in a rut. And which is very different than to say, I have this favorite way that I name, the unnameable. But ask yourself the question, is it still your favorite? Is there something else? And what happens inside you when you change the name of the divine? And that again is just for your own self-awareness, but also how are you connecting in prayer publicly or with your community or with a group of people simply by how you name the divine. So being able to open it and be comfortable to have different words coming out of your mouth can really be important. In the same, and by the same token, maybe other side of the coin, I would say that's also true to have, be really comfortable saying some of the more traditional, God, just, some of the more traditional things so that again, you can be contextually relevant with whatever group that you're with. So changing up the name, I think, is a good practice, and then noticing what happens inside you, in your heart, in your mind, in your body, as you name the unnameable. And then, of course, to avoid centering Christian-only language, unless it is contextually expected. An example in Unity, we often will talk about the Christ within or the Christ presence within and around us, and that is, pretty broad. We open it up, rather than saying in the name of Jesus, we, Unity, that classic closing of the Unity, silent Unity prayer is in the name and through the nature of the living, loving Christ, is a different connotation than naming Jesus. So again, to be more inclusive, to allow those who might be shut off to overtly Christian language. There are simple ways that are very much in alignment with our Unity teachings and theology. Thank God, and I think that's why many of us are attracted to Unity, is because we have room to really explore and play with our own understanding of the divine. So we have more core principles of inclusive prayer language. To honor diversity without dilution. So we can use phrases like we gather across traditions. So rather than sort of not naming, we actually honor the diversity that may be present. We gather across traditions. So we're coming together regardless of our traditions. we're coming together across our experiences, across our beliefs. We are united in love. We are united in faith. We are united in peace or harmony or unity. So I just gave some different examples there that so that again we can try the language, we can see what happens in us, what really resonates with us. You know, as we know, we have no prayer police in unity. Again, thank you God for that. But it's an opportunity to get comfortable and also to have all of these words really ready and on the tip of your tongue so that, you know, if you've been asked to stand and give an invocation at, you know, some kind of public gathering, that you're going to be able to assess the space and then easily let those words flow in a way that really reaches into the hearts of those who are present. You know, it could be a very different gathering to say we gather across traditions versus we gather across experiences. You know, and what is at the heart of the activity for which you're offering the prayer? So are we united in harmony or in unity? Of course, I guess saying united in unity might be a little redundant, but you know, we gather, we stand in our unity. You know, we hold our unity closely. There are different ways to say that, but to really just look at these words, they're already words that you're familiar with. You probably already use a lot of them in your prayer language and in your prayers, but to really tag them in your mind and in your heart as, you know, inclusive, to really just see them that way. That's how we build the skill set. And that's how we build the awareness and the consciousness around the language that we are using. So then we can also allow silence as a bridge. Silence is universally inclusive. And so not being afraid to give that space, you know, not even having to fill it with a breath, just to give that space of silence. It is a way that as human people that our bodies, our nervous systems have a natural response to silence, and especially when we are in collective silence. And so to notice and to know that that's not just a unity part of, you know, one of our 5-step, you know, unity prayer process. It is a universal experience, and to really put, again, tag that in your brain as a tool that you can bring to a diverse gathering when you're offering prayer. Then we also want to avoid assumptions of belief. So we can say for those who pray, for those who meditate, for those who hold hope. I mean, you're really, you know, if you get to for those who hold hope, you're pretty much going to include everybody. You know, there are very few people who at the very least don't have hope. But, you know, if you say for, you know, for those with faith, again, then it might for the agnostics, so I don't know if I have faith. You know, for the atheists, well, you know, what do I believe in? You might get people in their head and excluding them, but for those who pray, for those who meditate, for those who hold hope, you know, for those who want to take a moment, you know, to focus our attention, you know, then we get broader and broader. And again, that's just, you know, taking sort of an assessment of the group that you're with and always knowing that even in our own, you know, spiritual centers and the pews, there may be a variety of people. There may be people who are still questioning their faith. It would not be, you know, would not feel invited in if we were addressing for those with faith. So it's, again, we can't always predict and know the inner terrain of every single person that we're gathered with, but the more often we change the language that we use, the more people who feel included, just by the nature that we are shifting our language. It feels, it sort of communicates unconsciously or subconsciously, I guess is the better way to say that, an opening, an invitation to come in. And if someone doesn't see themselves exactly in the word that you said, the fact that you were open, they can step into that, and it feels safer. It validates different modes of connecting with the divine. The more we can loosen our language, and it allows people to be in their own definition. My daughter grew up in you know, in the Unikids or unit and then Uniteens and the YOU, and then she taught the UCOP kids for the first 2 or 3 years after I came to UCOP. I overheard her on the phone saying, "Yeah, spirituality is not really, it's not really important to me." And I'm like, it's like a fish in water. It's part of everything she is and everything she does. But how she connects and defines that I have no idea. I don't even know. And I tried asking her about it, and we didn't get very far in the conversation. She was just more irritated that I was listening to her phone conversation. But it's something that I just keep in mind because of the assumptions that we make about people and how does that she can pray a unity prayer and she means it, but then to also say spirituality is not, and maybe it's because her mom's a minister and what she means is it's not the center of everything I do like my mom. I don't know, but to really just check our assumptions and to allow our language to create more space for people, to make the tables longer and allow people whatever space they need to connect to the divine. All right, here we go. Praying in politically divided settings. Center shared values, not ideology. And if you have to go to the values that are written, on your website, you can take from unity.org or unityuwm.org, and there are values there. But we've all agreed to those. We can get to those regardless of what your political leanings are, and how you're feeling in the moment. So we want to use language of compassion, of healing, justice, safety, dignity. We want to affirm human dignity as a spiritual principle that transcends politics. When people come in charged, they're triggered, they're afraid, and they are looking to their minister, who they maybe know is just a left-leaning liberal, but they showed up in the hopes that they would get some kind of peace today, or vice versa. They know the person in the pew last week had, a shirt on that, you know, revealed that they have a very different political leaning than them. We want to be able to create safety and to really find the ideals, the values that we share and that we have in common. And at the very root of that is human dignity. We affirm the sacred worth of all people, period. We want to avoid using us and them framing, and it's so easy to do, and it can be so subtle in the way that it's done that we might not think we're doing it. So this is like a really good practice, and here's just some examples. We hold in prayer all who grieve gun violence, all who live in fear, and all called to the sacred work of creating communities of peace and safety. Now, somebody can listen to this on the far left and be upset. Someone can listen to this on the far right and be upset. But if you really examine the sentence, there's nothing in there that is right, left, or anywhere. We hold and grieve. Insert whatever it is, gun violence. We're holding in prayer all who grieve, all who live in fear, and all who are called to the sacred work of creating communities of peace and safety. Those are straight from our values, maybe perhaps from our vision statement, from our mission statement. So really get clear, and especially if you find yourself, the closer any particular event is to your community, to your loved ones, to people in your spiritual community, the more challenging and more it can be, and the more important it's going to be for you to connect to the words that you're using. Any thoughts? Kind of said a lot, and I know we save our discussion for the fourth Thursday, but I want to just take a breath here and give us opportunity. If there's anything that's coming forward for you that you want to share, Karen.
I very much appreciate all of it, all
Good.
of the languaging. I realize I'm kind of stuck on beloved presence. I use that for all my openings and closings and stuff. And I was just imagining inserting different language at different points in the prayer. And one of my very favorite words in the English language is compassion. So coming back to that word, I also think it's really important to address suffering as a whole. I got a phone call from a stranger yesterday. She asked for a prayer, and I was um, so pleased to be able to respond to it.
Mhm.
And it was her suffering that asked for it. So just addressing that, recognize, I'm sure she felt recognized. So this
Exactly.
language is wonderful. Thank you. I wrote it all down.
Good, good. Thank you, David.
Mhm.
Karen.
I'm struck again through all of the examples that you've given on your slides that in the effort to include people who already know how they feel about certain things or how they feel differently about certain things or how they're questioning y- w- using these creative ways, creative to me,
Mhm.
ways
Yeah.
of, really naming things in a more bedrock. For me, it feels so much more uniting in a bedrock kind of a way.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, these are our principles. That's where the bedrock of our faith and our lives. All of us as humans,
Hmm.
not just as unity people. And what I want to say is for those who are searching, or for those who feel they aren't this thing, they aren't that thing, they don't know where they go or where they belong anymore or
Hmm.
whatever, we are actually teaching another path. You have broken through a wall that I thought was implacable or that was labeled with theology that I grew up with. You broke through that wall and you showed me there's a field and
Hmm.
that I can go this way. I can consider, I don't have to be partisan. I don't have to figure out which side I'm on,
Hmm.
where I'm going to land, but rather I can be in the bedrock of I share the same desire for peace and safety in my community, and I am looking for an answer I don't have,
Yes.
and therefore the bigger the crowd we can gather in the bottom of this bedrock, the greater the chances are we'll come up with an answer,
Yes.
because everybody will be in it.
I love
To
it.
me, what could be more important for us to do, not just to invite people into it, but to affirm this is the path. We have
Mhm.
to find ways to do this in the 3D world, and it has
Yes.
to begin here in planting it in prayer.
I love that. All of that. It is so powerful when, when we could just get to the bedrock. I love that visualization um, before we've built up all our walls, right? All of the
Exactly.
walls to keep so and so out or other people in, and and that kind of
Right.
thing. And that's where all the fears are baked into those walls. And if you can get down to that, I think I'm with you. I think that we all really want the same things. We all want kindness. We all want happiness. We all want peace. And
It's 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 human, and it's
yeah,
not, and it is, and the politics that we're drowning in is
yeah,
so it is it's so insidious that in fact it tries to it tries to cast this one into this
yeah.
camp or that camp, just by a word we stumble across or one we try to use to describe something, and we're all being categorized and so afraid of using certain words that really our values are still attached to,
Mm.
but to not appear like we're there and not
Right.
over here. And I mean, I can't join in with everything else that's going on. I at least have share this with them.
Hmm.
It's so confusing, and it's so insidious that to be able to drop into this in that purity of
Hmm.
humanity, like you're
Hmm.
saying, that we
Yeah.
really share, that is the liberation, and that is what is gonna lead
Mm.
us. I'm sorry, I'm so
No,
impassionate.
I love
I'm,
that.
I'm
I love that.
retired right now, so I've got all of these things pent up in all
Yeah,
of my rage at what is happening and my concerns about everything that's going on in our country, and trying to find an outlet. I'm
yeah,
searching for
for
one for
sure.
me. So
For
anyway,
sure.
anyway. That's it by
Yeah, and
explanation.
yeah, and we all are. And I think yeah, that liberation, that word that you said is so important because, even as ministers, who are serving communities, oftentimes, I think this is my experience, and I have talked to other colleagues who feel the same. You can feel sort of boxed in and trapped, limited as to
Right.
what you can say without pissing people off. And then there's, like, well, I'm going to say this anyway, or, bless them on their way out, that kind of thing. But I think we need our own liberation because if we're coming from a place where we're feeling trapped and like we have to toe a certain, the company line or whatever, then we're not able to offer our best either. Now, I say that with compassion for the work that we do. If the best that you can do right now is to like, where's my box? Let me get in it, and I'm just going to keep going because there are so many
Right.
factors in church life and ministry life that go into it. But I think that word liberation is that we have to demonstrate that. How do we find our own liberation? It's baked into our principles. It's baked into all of our spiritual tools, and we've got to live that more out loud, I think, than ever, so that we can find our way through to lead people, to help people find their own ways to their own tools for that liberation. And then when we do that over and over, then we get an aggregate, experience, a collective experience out of that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I would just like to place here in the room with the three of us that and whoever else is watching,
Yeah.
is that I am also facing 4 family weddings in the coming year. It'll be my first time doing a family wedding in my 30 plus years of ministry that I've ever been invited into it. And one of them is my daughter, amazingly.
Wow.
And I have a lot of trepidation in advance of that because of the mixture of family, the
Hmm.
tensions that are in weddings, all of that.
Hmm.
And I'm looking at my service trying to think, I don't pray the way a lot of people
Yeah.
might be expecting. It is very difficult for me to um, again, I have to evaluate that too. Of just simply, I used to just very easily simply use language that I thought would appeal and would it be expected. And knowing it, knowing who Jesus is, I can say Jesus, knowing what Jesus' teachings were. And knowing that it's also a flag, it's also, his name is a flag, his presence, is challenging for people. All, all of
Yeah.
that all mixed
Hmm.
together, and yet, wanting to be authentic in the moment and
Hmm.
also to be true to something that is really and truly, I don't want to create controversy. I only want to bless this whole gathering of people who've come together because of love. So,
Yes. Yeah.
and I try to just say, I moved away from God blesses this union or anything like that. I
Yeah.
just say, love has called us here. Love is surrounding us now.
Hmm.
How can anybody argue with love? And they
They
can,
can't.
if they know that God is the one who loves them, then they already know the
Yeah.
source of it. They
Yeah.
and I don't have to name it.
Yeah.
If it disturbs them that I don't bother to name it, I guess that's something they just have to figure out.
Right. Right. Yeah, I love that. I mean, love is the great unifier, right? And oftentimes
Mhm.
people will think you said God,
Yes.
even though you didn't, because they are so
Right.
connected to God as love, and so that, that
That's a
I
good
often
point.
find is that, if you're using love, even if you throw in a divine love, in there, that people will think you said God, and they just move with it because they're so caught up in the love that's in the space and being part of that, especially now at a time when there's so much division and divisiveness, to just come
Right.
together for any joy-filled reason is it's water
A
in the
blessing.
desert. It's-
No kidding. And
yeah.
and a reaffirmation of family, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, it
Yes.
just it just reaffirms that, you know, this we can agree on. If we can't
Mm-hmm.
agree on anything else, can we
Yeah.
not just love being here with each other,
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to throw this in here. This is not part of my presentation, but I heard, I think NPR had uh, an interview this week, and they were talking about how words of nature are being used less frequently. Yeah, frequently. Did you hear that? And even imagery. And I thought, what an opportunity for us to sort of influence that and shape that and bring those words and meditation, prayer, easy places to do that, to compare. But then my next thought was, well, incoming generations don't have those experiences. Will it mean the same thing to them as it means to me? And I just I feel like I have to trust somewhere that in our genetic makeup as human species that there is a desire and a connection to nature that will speak to us. But um the power of words and the association with them in language. Yeah.
well, oh, honey, we could sit and talk about this for the rest of the day. Um, my study right now is involved in therapeutic shamanism, which is really
Yes.
looking at animistic ways and
Hmm.
ways that we saw ourselves
Hmm.
as hunter-gatherers,
Hmm.
and really just saw ourselves as part of a huge web of life and
Hmm.
continuity of intelligence and wisdom. And we are the children who really don't know our ways, and the
Hmm.
wisdom surrounds us in all that is. And it comes to us really as those, ideas of love and of
Yes.
wisdom and of through our intuition and insight.
Hmm.
And it comes through all of life itself, and
Yes.
in trusting that. And the other thing is retreats and all those things that we do,
Hmm.
when we heal ourselves, when we want healing, we go to the ocean, we go to the
Hmm.
mountain, we go
Hmm.
we go to the field. We
Hmm.
go to the places that nurture us back. Why is that so? Because we're immersed
Yeah.
in healing wisdom all around us, and
Hmm.
we do it intuitively because we desperately need it. Even if it's
Hmm.
just a plot surrounded by sidewalk, there
Yeah.
is a place of green that's growing.
Yes.
Draw strength from that. We can
Yes.
do that.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And it takes me back to liberation. It's that liberation from our human constructs and from the pain that comes from some of the ways that we come together as people. And again, that bedrock, that love, peace, harmony,
Mhm.
healing, justice, safety, dignity. All of those are keys to that liberation. And the more we can connect to those root words and concepts, the more we connect to the planet, the more we experience, the more frequently we experience that liberation. And right now, I think so many people want liberation from this polarized thinking, from the fear mongering and everything that's happening. And so it's the opportunity of our lifetimes to be part of these conversations that are moving humanity forward. I'm going to jump back
Oh,
in to addressing gun violence and prayer. Name the
Mm-hmm.
grief and trauma honestly. I think sometimes we shy away from, saying negative words, and we want to dance around topics. And it's fine, as part of our process to get there. But if we can get to the heart of it and name the grief and the trauma honestly, we bring to our hearts the lives lost. There was death, there were lives lost, the families shattered, the children who deserve safety, however we want to name it, but to name it. Because if we don't name it, then we aren't validating the feelings and the experiences of those most directly involved, but of even those in the room who are hearing our prayers and sharing our prayers with us. We can't dance around it. Also, I think it's so powerful to give people something to do. Now, we're going to do this every week. I mean, we can't, that's not why we're gathering every week, but there are times when it gets so big, or the closer it hits to home, or if there's someone in your congregation who's directly impacted by something, giving some, people something to do. Light a candle at the altar. Allow for people to come up before service starts or have during a song. So it doesn't extend the service at all, except for as long as it takes to tell people during this song, come forward and light a candle for peace, for a person, for, whether it's, related to some, violent event that happened, or give them permission to be present to what's happening in their own life, because someone who is going through a really difficult diagnosis or healing experience or their own personal loss, they're
Mhm.
not going to be able to think about what's happening in the world, if they can't address what's happening in their own lives. So giving that permission, but give them something to do, light a candle, behold the flame and the magic. That's nature, right? And that is, the
Mhm.
core. The fire is so powerful. Hand out prayer cards, call Silent Unity together so you're all doing something and receive that beautiful prayer from Silent Unity. Hold a prayer vigil, just giving people something to do. Put something in your newsletter that, a link to the Silent Unity online vigil, just to give people something to do. And I think it's important to, I didn't put this in here, but to address that rhetoric of no more thoughts and prayers. We always start with prayer so that our actions are empowered, and so to remind people that, we're not stopping at prayer. This is our foundation so that we act in a way that, is for the greatest good and the greater good, and that is productive and not destructive,
Mhm.
constructive. But I think it's important for us to sort of push back against that narrative, that we are still going to pray. Like,
Mhm.
so that we aren't just out there doing whatever. This is where we connect with the divine, and we bring our best selves forward into action, but give people something to do. There's a website which I usually give here, and I'm sorry I didn't. It's Justice and Witness Ministries, and I think it is part of the UCC denomination, justiceandwitnessministries.org, I'm pretty sure. They have on there this really beautiful web page that you can go to, and you can click on any sort of major issue that's happening, and it will pre-populate. You put in your address where you live, it will pre-populate a letter to your elected officials of where you live. You can edit that, but it'll sort of write a template based on whatever topic you or issue you chose. It's like, as a person of faith, this is important to me. And you can rewrite it, and it goes directly to your elected officials and they read it. You will get responses from them. And I think it's such a great, teaching your community how to access that. Put a link to it in your newsletter, post it on social media. So again, it gives people something to do, that is, action that can make a difference, in the world, and tie it to their faith experience. So I just want to throw that in there. Pray for all
Beautiful.
stakeholders, victims, families, first responders, communities, lawmakers. Like, hold them all in the prayer. Been over the last several years this sort of move away from having naming like a shooter, or a perpetrator of crime, so that they aren't getting sort of the glory. I think, including their family members, and I think including the consciousness that leads someone, to that, to taking that action. If we don't start praying for that, what are we just going to let it? Like, we're going to pray for everything else except that. Again, it comes to naming the grief and the trauma honestly, and I think there's something to that. I've seen in some communities, we've done it at UCOP before too, where like there's a school shooting and there were 10 deaths. We might have 10 candles representing those lives, and then one for the shooter, but away from those 10 candles, which can be a really interesting visual that also promotes forgiveness, and also addresses our oneness belief. I mean, we can't say that we're one with everyone except, So how do we manage that? And how we as spiritual leaders manage that and address that in our communities models for people how to do it in the world. So again, I say face these things head on. We do no favors to anyone by avoiding anything, for fear of being overly political or whatever. We don't have to let it get politicized, but we've got to be really clear with our language and with our intention and with our goal and the experiences we want to give people. Pray for transformation. We are guided to action rooted in compassion, so we end cycles of harm. right there. Indisputable. And I think everyone can get behind that. Now, we might fight over the actions, and that's good. That could be good debate. But we are guided to action rooted in compassion. So we may end cycles of harm. No one's going to argue with that. And it helps people remember, get out of those meaningless distraction fights, and let's get to the core of what's happening and what we want in our communities. We want to end cycles of harm. Hold space for anger without turning prayer into a rally speech. It's okay to voice anger in prayer. I remind my community all the time that you don't come to your meditation peace, love, and joy. You don't need to meditate right now. Go spread your peace, love, and joy. Come to your meditation in your anger, in your fear, in your sadness and grief, in your terror, whatever it is, and allow yourself to be transformed in that meditation experience. And I think it's okay for us to model that too in our prayer, to let our own rage out, but without perverting the experience of prayer for people. They still need to be able to trust us with their spiritual vulnerability and their emotional vulnerability in that prayerful space. So we've got to be really clear when we do that, but to hold space for that and to yes. If we don't feel the anger, we're not going to ever move through it. And then these cycles just keep going on and on. That's part of the problem is, this sort of denying negative or undesirable feelings. They're there. We've got to feel them and let them out and let them loose and know that, the presence, the holy presence that we're tapping into can hold that space. It has created us. And so, but we've got to let it out and get it out of our bodies. So I'm going to give you some practical tools. Yeah, we've got just a couple more slides here. Inclusive invocation. Spirit of love. We gather across traditions and beliefs with hearts open to the mystery that holds us all. In silence, in song, in words, through tears, we join in prayer for healing, for peace and courage. Another one, we bring our attention to our faithful hearts, united in faith and our desire for peace and unity. We offer a silence that draws us together as a people who desire a world free of violence and hate, and filled with justice and harmony. Play with the words, but those are just kind of some simple frameworks that you can find the words that feel really good in your mouth or that are really appropriate for whatever the context is that you're offering these prayers. But don't be afraid to use kind of, a template just to get yourself in, but then don't get in a rut with it. So, I always want to come back to that. Keep it alive, keep it vibrant, allow yourself to, to come through and trust yourself to change the template. So these are just some of my words. And this PowerPoint will be available on the Esker website too, if you want to come back to it later. Meditation guidance. Use sensory or imagery-based languages. Breathe into spaciousness. Imagine light filling you, rather than the theological terms. Let our meditation be experiential. And again, I think, based on what we talked about here too, is bring those nature words in and really help people connect. Because the imagination, all the studies show that if we imagine that we've done something, we're 90% there, right? So so the body will respond to that. And that's at the cellular level, which is made of God stuff. So let's invite choice. You may call upon God, spirit, creative source, or simply breathe into your own center of being. See all that permission in there. I don't know if it's God, I don't know if it's spirit, I don't know, but I can breathe into my own center of being. And here I am with you, and I feel called in to join you. Trust is deepened to wherever you're going to take me in this meditative experience, and I feel seen. So the power of language. Okay, last slide. Covenant, actually second to last slide. Covenant of care for leaders. You know this. Oh, I'm going to add a T to that. Spiritual leaders covenant to speak with awareness of global and interfaith perspectives. Choose words that create belonging for all. Hold space for silence and lament as sacred acts. Address harm like gun violence in ways that center compassion, not ideology. Easier said than done. I know. I know. I know. But there are tools and these are skills, and we can raise our competency. And at a time like this, we need to spend the time doing that for our own mental health, for our own well being, for our own spiritual experience, as well as for the communities that we are leading and the people that we come into contact with, because there's not a place that you're going today where it's not in the air in one way or another. So just being able to hold that space and choose your words in such a way that truly reflect what you believe. And that's at the core of what we're talking about. These words are, we're not making anything new up. We're just really tightening up, getting out of our habits and allowing ourselves, our language to evolve in a way that really reflects the truth of our principles and what we teach and believe in unity. And I want to give you this blessing. May our words be wide enough to hold the world, deep enough to name the pain, and tender enough to heal the human heart. So I bless you in the work that you do. And I'm so grateful to be joined with you in these conversations. And as always, I ask you to think about it, talk about it, and demonstrate it. And so I'm going to give the very same homework assignment between now and when we meet 2 weeks from now, to take some time to listen to your prayers or your meditations and just notice, are you in a rut or not? Are you like, hey, this is great. I love what I'm doing and I'm going to do more of that, or what can you take from this to really, fine tune? Or is there a way that maybe you've been holding back in your prayer and you're like, it's time, I'm being called to, have more of a boldness, or to let some of my rage out, or to let some of my fear out, or my despair. And let's hold that together in community, because it's not just you know. So thank you for blessing me. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and we can chat and start any discussions, and then we'll meet again in 2 weeks, and that will not be a recorded session, so it'll all be for discussion. Thank you and bless you.